I felt like Gollum in the Ring, like my precious,
Yeah.
yes, is just in a dark cave, secluded from the world and from life. But as long as I had that one thing, I had everything that I needed.
Chris and Vanessa, thank you guys so much for being on the Recovery About podcast. I'm so glad you guys are here. You're with Ground 40.
Yes.
What's some of the things that you do with Ground 40?
I came through the program in November of 2020, and I had gotten married to Vanessa in April of 2020. So the first, 5-6 months of our marriage, I was at the tail end of my addiction. So just not necessarily the first 6 months that you want to spend with somebody.
Right.
Just
What was your drug of choice?
So I started, as I'm sure most people do. I played sports in middle school and high school and in college, and I got injured. And you usually need to perform and keep playing and doing what you need to do. So I started taking painkillers and started taking more than I needed. And then it grew and it grew and it grew. And then I became a heroin addict. I was a heroin addict for a solid 5 years, but I did opiates and fentanyl for probably 10 years. And then I was an alcoholic.
Were you introduced to heroin, or you just said one day, I'm going to go smoke some heroin or I'm going to shoot some heroin?
Yeah, so I was a science and anatomy major, so I had to do like clinical hours and stuff at the hospital. So like needles, taking blood, using them, not getting air bubbles in there, stuff like that, like was very familiar to me. And one of the guys that I used to get my pills from, it was kind of like that, like, oh, I don't have any pills today. Okay, well, what do you have? But I've got some heroin if you want to try that. I'm like, oh, I've never done that. What is that? Oh, man, it's great. It's cheaper. And then you start, and just like anything else, it's a little bit at first, and then it's more, and then it's a daily habit.
That's how crack was for me. Like I did a lot of cocaine. I loved cocaine, but it got to where it was so expensive. And then I found out this little rock
It was cheaper. And
cheaper,
better high.
And but then it's just like you need 40 of those little rocks,
That in its core is how, in my opinion, how all sin starts, right? How all addiction starts. It's very pretty at first. It helps you. It makes you feel better. It's just a little bit. It's just once in a while. And then you start to do it more, and you start to do it more. And it gets its hooks in you so deep that there's just this moment where you finally wake up and you like look around at your surroundings and you're like, how did I get here? I'm doing things I never would have imagined that I would do. I'm saying things that I never would have thought that I would be able to say. Like, it completely distorts every part of who you are inside and out, and it turns you into something that you never thought you could become.
That was me. Like, I didn't want to be that guy laying in the living room in this trailer surrounded by all these liquor bottles. And, I remember digging through the carpet looking for something I'd dropped for hours, just hoping and praying I would find something.
Yeah.
It was great. I didn't want to be that way, though.
No. It doesn't just take hold of you physically. It is just as much mental and spiritual. I remember being curled up in a ball, crying and weeping like a baby, and just willing to do anything to make the pain go away and to make it stop. And nothing else in the world exists other than that feeling, making it stop, and achieving some type of, because at that point, it's not euphoria anymore. It's maintenance.
Yes, that's a good word. It's maintenance. How old were you again when you started using for the first time? You'd had this injury in sports?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that was the catalyst. But the first time I started using or drinking or taking pills or any of that, I was probably 12 or 13.
Same.
Started with like, hey, this is a Valium. Take it. What does it make you do? Or what does it make you feel? It just makes you feel calm. Okay. Smoke weed, steal some liquor out of your parents' liquor cabinet and, drink too much. But then, you don't drink for a while because you're throwing up all the next day. But then just incrementally, bit by bit, piece by piece, by the time I was 18, full blown, taking, using every single day, starting to notice when I didn't have it. Like, I think it's when you like experience withdrawal symptoms for the first time, like there's a moment where you're like, this is a problem.
Yep.
Like this is an issue. Like why do I feel this way? And it clicks in your mind. Like I am dependent on on this drug, this whatever it is alcohol, if it's cocaine, if it's opiates, whatever it is. But when you have that realization, you have that moment, you have that epiphany, like you don't stop. Now you're just cognizant of it. And now you treat it like, a diabetic. Like, I got to make sure to take my insulin. This is going to be part of my life right now. I need to make sure that I balance everything. And I've had people, in addiction tell me, you wouldn't apologize if you had to take your antipsychotics every single day. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Then why do you apologize that you have to take heroin every 8 hours or you're going to get sick? Like, that is your sickness. That's your disease. And I think that was just another way to justify it and be like, yeah, that's my disease. I have a sickness.
Yeah.
And this is just what I'm prepared to do for the rest of my life, just like any other normal human being.
And we just lock into that.
Yeah.
Because that's our comfort. Mm-hmm. So thinking back to like the worst of worst times, what was rock bottom for you?
I've had many rock bottoms, and it seems like at different points of my life, they were all terrible, but they were terrible for different reasons. So one of my first rock bottoms in my heroin addiction was me accepting the fact that I need just heroin in my life every single day for the rest of my life. And it doesn't matter where I live. It doesn't matter how I exist. As long as I have my heroin, I'm okay. And I was willing to live the rest of my life with the sole purpose of just making sure that I had heroin every day.
So the heroin was going to be your wife, your kids.
Yep.
And you were locked in. That was what it was going to be.
As long as I had it, I was okay. I was happy. I was comfortable. I had what I needed. Didn't matter if I lived in a trailer, lived on the streets, lived in a tent, never got married, never had a car, never had a child. That was the only thing, purpose, identity, everything that I needed. And that was it. So accepting that was the trajectory of my life forever and ever, like this is all I need. I felt like Gollum in The Ring, like my precious, yes, is just in a dark cave, secluded from the world and from life. But as long as I had that one thing, I had everything that I needed. That rock bottom shifted me away from heroin and opiates. I didn't go to recovery. I didn't go to detox. I didn't go to any of that. I cold turkeyed it. I left. I went through withdrawals for a couple of months, didn't sleep, just horrible transition. And I made it, far enough in that to say that I never want to go through this again because I don't think I can. And I think that I'll just kill myself. Like, I've made it so far through this process that if I use, I'm going to restart that clock and I'm going to go back to having to go through this all over again.
So you've done this once. You didn't have any relapses?
From heroin, no. Opiates, yes.
Okay.
But the frequency of the use wasn't something that was as consistent as it was prior. So like, the withdrawal symptoms weren't there. And I don't know if you've ever gone through like heroin withdrawals.
No, I never did heroin. I had alcohol and cocaine withdrawals.
Yeah.
Early in the morning, like my handwriting would be different. Mm-hmm. Like when I would go to work, I had to write certain things down in this logbook. I had to drink. Just like you said, you had to have that heroin every so often. I had to have some kind of substance in me, whether it be a pill. I just had to have that rush of something. It could be alcohol or a drunk feeling, or it could be the high feeling from a Percocet, or it could be the paranoia from doing a line of cocaine, or the super paranoia from smoking crack. I just had to have something that wasn't that regular, normal feeling.
So for me, like I could shoot up and I'd be good for 6 or 8 hours. Like I could make it through a work day and then go home and use. But with you, like, did you drink at work?
Yeah.
Did you like sneak it in the bathroom? Like, how did you?
I would drink at work. The last couple of jobs, I made sure that there were times I would be alone. And I would go outside to smoke a cigarette. I used to smoke. And I would drink while I was in my car. And nobody would know because I would make sure I wouldn't go around. I didn't have to go around anybody after that. So I didn't have a job where I had to interact with a whole lot of people. But that's how I got caught, was because I was drinking on the job and some lady smelt it on me.
So I was a chef. I cooked, I served, I bartended, I did everything. And once I stopped using heroin, I gravitated towards alcohol. So like started drinking. Yeah, I would drink, but when you're in an addiction, you can't justify spending your money on anything else other than your drug of choice. So like I didn't drink for years because all of my time, money, and energy went to getting dope. And then when I stopped using dope, there was still this void in my heart that I was trying to fill. And so I needed something, but I knew that I couldn't do that because I couldn't go back to that. So I gravitated towards what the world accepts and what you have to be 21 years and older to do. And that was alcohol for me. And I have an addictive personality and I abuse whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. I abuse working out and going to the gym. I abuse eating healthy, right? Like can't have this, can't have this, can't have this. Like either I am all or I am nothing. There's very few and far in between. So much so that it's like I don't even want to do it or commit to it unless I can do it in excellence, because to sell myself short or to not perform well, like I can't handle that.
Before we get back to today's episode, I want to take a second and thank the Craig family with Craig International. These guys have become some great friends of mine over the last 7 years, and I just want to say thank you so much for becoming sponsors of the Recovery Valve podcast.
When I was about 25, a gentleman that I worked for that's actually on staff with us now at Ground 40, his name's Matthew Skanga. So he owned a restaurant in downtown Monroe, which was called Stone Table. I went and started working there around 25 or 26, fresh out of my heroin addiction, becoming a full-blown alcoholic. And he presented Christ to me in such a way that wasn't direct, it was more observational. And so what I mean by that was, I look around and I'm like, man, he's got a wife. He's got beautiful kids. He's got a restaurant. He's got a successful business. He's got his own house.
It's a different kind of wealth.
Well, but it's like
it's not money wealth.
It is, but I also know who he is on an individual level. He's a crack smoker. He's a cokehead, right? He's an alcoholic. And I'm like, so this is a guy that suffers from the same thing that I suffer from, but yet I see these things that he's been blessed with. What does he have that I don't have?
So he had all these blessings while he was in addiction? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's crazy.
Yeah. One of the first nights we ever did a cooking class together, and unbeknownst to me, he said, hey, you want to get a couple of beers? We'll put them in the walk-in. We'll do this cooking class, and we'll just have a couple of beers while we do it, which is totally normal in the restaurant industry. Like it's accepted behavior. So I said, yeah, sure. And we have a few beers. We do this cooking class. We say goodnight to them. They leave. We're shutting down the restaurant. And he says, hey, I'm going to finish up. Why don't you go ahead and get out of here? And I said, yeah, yes, chef. I left. I went to work the next day. His mom comes up to me and she's like, where's Matthew? And I'm like, what do you mean, where's Matthew? This is what happened. This is when I left. This is what he said. And she was like, oh, Christopher, no, he can't drink. Once he starts drinking, he's going to hit the streets and he's going to go find coke or find crack. So like I kind of knew that he had some issues, but then after that night, it solidified it in my brain. I said, okay, but yet still to know that about him, to know that he struggles with it and to see all of these things, it was, again, what does he have that I don't have? Yeah. And even though he's broken, even though he makes mistakes, even though that he screws up, even though that he falls short, he still has a relationship and a pursuit of Christ. So for me, coming from a broken background, addiction, struggling, worthlessness, I could receive it from somebody that came from where I came from. Whereas somebody in a suit and tie that was all dressed up real pretty telling me that Jesus loves me, I'm like, dude, you don't know where I come from. You don't know what I've dealt with.
Right.
So maybe in your beautiful world, yep, Christ is king and he loves you, but like, you don't know what I've done. And so to be able to receive it from somebody that was just like me, I could actually accept it. And then, you read about like Paul, incarcerating men, women, and children and murdering Christians of the faith. It's like, man, I'm not as screwed up as I thought I was. And look how God used him.
Right.
Maybe he can use me too. So I say all that to say that as I was being discipled by Matthew, we started getting pulled towards Ground 40. We started to interact with Wes, Cody Honeycutt, Chad Austin, men that were on staff there. So because we had a restaurant, the guys would come to the restaurant. We would have prayer meetings. We would have groups. We would go to church together. So the Lord was kind of already knitting us together long before I would need them. So 2020, COVID happens. We have to shut down the restaurant because everything's in chaos. We closed the restaurant down the day before Vanessa and I get married. So I believe it was April 19th. It was a Good Friday.
April 11th.
April 11th.
So when did you and Vanessa meet?
Summer of 2018, yeah. We met on a blind date. And I'm actually from Washington State. I was born and raised there, and met one of my good friends, and I'd come visit her and her family every summer. And she owned a Thai restaurant downtown Monroe. We had common connections, and they set us up on a blind date.
And you guys started dating while you were still in your addiction?
Yes.
Did you know about the heroin and all that?
On our first date, he told me about his heroin past, and I grew up in a Christian home. I've loved God and tried to pursue him all my life. So I'm like, oh my gosh! I remember when I got home, I searched up the rate of like lasting sobriety from heroin, and it was like part of a
lower than 10%.
It was very small, yeah. And that sort of scared me.
I drank, and I drank a lot. I also was a very high functioning alcoholic.
Yeah.
There were plenty of times where like I would be functional and cognitive until I blacked out. Many times I would have full-blown conversations with people and interactions with people, and even Vanessa, and tell them later, or they would find out later, and it's like, yeah, that was a bottle of vodka in. It wasn't, and I was good until I wasn't good.
Yeah.
So I drank a lot with her, but we never tell the full truth. We're very good manipulators and liar, and we expose the left hand, but we don't really show what the right hand's doing.
Because it's almost like a way out. Just in case this doesn't work, nothing against you, but it's like just got to have one foot out the door, one hand out the window, I guess.
Yeah, and I think part of us wants that to happen.
Yeah.
I think that we self-destruct, and we hope that they leave us, because if they leave us, then it justifies our behavior.
Right.
So with Vanessa and I, we would only see each other for a small time because she lived in Washington State. So she was
Which
here,
is a long ways away.
which is, the correct timing and the Lord's will that, mutual friends got together. He's single, she's single. We should set them up on a date.
Yeah.
So I was truthful about some things, but then she would leave. She'd go back to Washington, and I would go back to working. I'd go back to smoking weed. I'd go back to using pills every now and then.
So as you guys were just dating, you were still doing kind of whatever you wanted, and you kind of knew. You're Googling to see. Like,
Googling to see if
you
this
wanted
is
to
gonna
miss
last.
like 1 foot out. It sounds like too. Like,
Yeah.
is this guy going to make it if we get
Yeah.
together? Like, is it going to last? So tell me a little bit about when you guys decided to kind of make it official, and you started dating, and you made this vow. Is the episode, recovery vow is how we make a vow to ourselves as addicts to take this next step. And then you guys make a vow to each other. But what was it like when you first got married? Were you still in active addiction?
We committed to each other, as you said. She went back to Washington. We said, hey, we're going to date. We're going to do this. 363 days from when we started our first date, I proposed to her. After the proposal, she went back to Washington, and I remained in North Carolina. And then about 2 days before she moved to North Carolina so that we could begin our marriage and our life together, in my mind, I was like, well, this is my last time to be happy or feel good, because my life's about to change. Once I'm married, I'll never be able to do any of these things again. So I made a decision to get some dope and use one last time, one last hurrah before my whole life changes. And it was laced with fentanyl. And at this point, it was very, like, I didn't have a tolerance, like I did.
Did you know it had fentanyl in it?
I didn't, but the problem and the danger with fentanyl is, on a molecular level. I mean, you're talking 1,000th of what is required to make you overdose. Like there's morphine, there's heroin, and then there's fentanyl, and you need far less of fentanyl than you do the other two. And so I, praise God, I had a roommate at the time. I went and I wasn't shooting up at this time. I would just snort it. And I started like, my throat was closing up. I was, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't swallow. And I just remember just everything going black. And I was gone. My roommate called the, paramedics, called, the police. Everybody showed up. And I just remember being revived in my living room and coming to, and, there's 6, 7, 8 paramedics and police officers and firefighters. So I come to. Matthew and Mallory make me call her the next day, again, in the way that, I'm a manipulator. I wait until she's already at the airport, that she's made it through TSA, because I know that it would be harder for her to leave if she was already in the airport and waiting on her flight. So I call to tell her the truth before she flies out and what I did. But I also do it in a way that she can't really...
Sneaky little sucker, aren't you?
Turn back.
Yeah.
So, of course, that was just one mistake. That was a one-off. It's never going to happen again. So she comes out. We're engaged for a little bit. We prepare for the wedding.
Big Washington State wedding
across the country with her family. But COVID happens in 2020. So we have to stay in North Carolina. We can only have a wedding here locally with, a handful of people. And we get married.
And it was great and beautiful.
It was great and beautiful.
Yeah. Saved us thousands.
Yeah. Yeah.
So go COVID. I'll never say that again.
Yeah. I'm still drinking, but I'm letting her see what she thinks I'm consuming, and then I'm also consuming behind her back.
Yeah.
Just letting her see me have 1 or 2 drinks. But then when I go to the bathroom, I've got a bottle of vodka in a bag or under the sink or under the mattress, and I'm chugging it, putting the cap back on, brushing my teeth, gum, mouthwash, hiding it, and then going back out like everything's fine.
Do you have any idea, Vanessa?
I had no idea about the secrecy. We talked about limiting alcohol use, and so I thought it was going okay. But of course, I'm not much of a detective.
Yeah. So what happened at home, like when you found this out? Like, what was the blow up?
I would say every weekend was sort of a blow up in our first 6 months of marriage.
Yeah.
We had opposite schedules. I was a school teacher and he was a chef. I'd work in the mornings and the afternoons. He'd work at night. We'd rarely see each other except for Sunday. And that's when he'd still be drinking. And I could tell he was off because he was doing better prior to being married. He had that accountability at Stone Table, that family atmosphere. But after getting married, he didn't have that accountability anymore. So it just was like this downward hill, And so every Sunday, I think we got in a fight for our first 6 months of marriage. It was not fun.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah. So with that, like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, me being from Washington State, I was like, well, if this doesn't work out, I'm going back to Washington, winter break, and I'm done teaching here.
Yeah. She was a strong, independent woman. She didn't need me for anything. She came for love and she came for marriage, and I just, was pissing it all away.
Yeah.
I had off on a Monday, and I remember I started drinking in the morning, and I blacked out around lunchtime, and I don't know what's happened. I don't know how much we've ever really talked about it. I know I yelled at her. I know I cussed at her. I know I put my hands on her. And I know that I woke up to the cops trying to break down the door because they were worried that because of my past that I had gotten hold of some dope and I was overdosing and I was dead inside. So the cops showed up. I let them in. She's outside. I don't really know what's going on. The cops take me into a different room. They let her in. She packs a bag. She leaves. They kind of explain the situation, and I realized that, like we were talking about earlier, that's a different rock bottom.
Yeah.
It wasn't a rock bottom like I had in my past before, but here it is. My marriage is falling apart. My life's about to end.
Your brand new marriage is falling apart. 6 months in.
And it's already going to divorce. So obviously this is an issue, and this is a problem in my life. So the next day, again, because of the relationships that the Lord had already formed between me and Wes and Cody and Matthew Skanga, and, yes, I was in my addiction. I have a meeting at the farm the next day, And I sit down with Wes, and I didn't go through the intake process. I didn't call. I didn't fill out an application. I didn't anything. But somebody had walked off the property the day before, and Wes said, dude, somebody walked off. We got a spot for you. I think you need to stay here for a week, and then we'll have a meeting with your wife, and we'll figure out where we can go from here.
What'd that do to you? Did you know his friends, Wes, and about Ground 40, kind of what it was going to be about?
Yeah, I knew about it. Yeah, I did know about it. And by that time, Matthew Skenga was working there. And I was relieved because whenever, we weren't together too often, but when he was working at his new restaurant location, I always knew he was probably drinking too much and not doing what I would appreciate. And so I knew that when he was in Ground 40, he was had to be sober. He was in a safe place, surrounded by godly men. And so I was relieved, and
I just going to stand by his side.
I was gonna wait. Yeah, I wasn't gonna hightail it out quite yet.
Yeah.
see if he turned around.
I mean, that's real good. So you did the program, you moved in at Ground 40, and you worked that process. Was that the day that you stopped using?
Yeah. So
you've been sober since that moment?
Yeah. So November 10th of 2020 would have been the last day that I ever drank.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Smoked weed or did anything. So, I mean, this year it'll be 4 years sober without anything.
You feel good?
I do. I do. I feel great. One of the most encouraging things that I feel, and one of the most encouraging things, if I say anything here today, is that I'm thankful that I know that I don't need any substance. I constantly told myself that I needed something. I deserved to have a drink because I was stressed. I deserved to have a drink because I needed to relax. I believed the lie that I wasn't a sociable person. And so to go out and to be sociable, I needed alcohol. Because of the pain, I needed pills. Because of the depression, anxiety, whatever my excuse was or my reason was for why I needed that substance, now coming up on 4 years of being through and going through worse things than I ever went through in my addiction, completely sober, I know that I don't need any of those things to help me in those situations.
You can cope. You can deal with life on life's terms.
Sure.
It's interesting, the two dynamics that you guys have, like to be married just 6 months and almost lose that, but you're still together now. And so you've been married 4 years?
4 years.
4 years now? And I'm assuming, I wouldn't be wrong, I would hope I'm not wrong, but life in recovery is probably pretty awesome.
Yes.
It's very awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's a lot of reward, right?
Yeah.
It's nothing.
He's a good man.
He sounds like a great man, and you sound like a great woman.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I think that, every couple's different. And I know we talked earlier before we started this about, you meeting your wife after your recovery had already started. And that's one dynamic. Another dynamic is I'm the addict, always have, been throughout my life until I found sobriety, right? And Vanessa's never touched a drug in her life. She can't even count on one hand how many times she's been drunk.
Oh, wow.
So we have two polar opposites that find each other. So sometimes it's you're sober and you enter into marriage. Sometimes, you're the addict and your husband or wife isn't, or you're both addicts, and those are all different dynamics of marriage.
Yeah. Did you feel like you had to fall in love with a different person after he became sober?
I feel like the better is just out more.
Okay.
So, I fell in love because he was great at conversation and a really fun guy, and he's funny, and we go hiking, and he's very active, and our spirits just aligned in that way. I told him while we were dating, I like you better when you're sober. And
no one had ever said that to me before.
Really?
That's how powerful it was.
Yeah.
Somebody had never said that to me before. I like you better when you're sober.
It's good.
So the good is just out.
I can't do it without Christ. Like, I can't do it without the Lord, but the Lord uses people. And Vanessa was the catalyst for that. So without her, I don't think that I would have found success. Many of us, we long and we desire for a partner. We long and desire for somebody that loves and cares for us. And I know that was something that I prayed for years and for years. And so for the Lord to finally give me that perfectly crafted individual that doesn't just give me or supply me with what I think that I want, but gives me what I need. And for me to be at this rock bottom, as we discussed earlier, of having to make a choice, is she worth taking a chance on? She's everything that you ever wanted, everything that you've ever asked for, everything that you've ever obtained self-pity for, or used as some type of excuse. I want to give it to you, son. Will you take it? Will you let go of this worldliness, this addiction that's in your hand, so that I can put something better in your hand? Mm-hmm. Will you trust me with that? Right. And it was a decision that I, would make again and again and again. But yeah, I mean, a wife is something that is holy and pure that cannot be replicated. And I think that she gets, outside of Christ, I think she gets all the rest of the credit.
That's great. That's where she should be.
Well, I mean,
Jesus, wife,
family,
kids,
family. And she had every reason to leave. She had every reason to go. And, I'm a lot of things, and I know that I'm not perfect, but I'd like to consider myself a loyal person. And when she loved me and cared about me at my lowest, it doesn't matter how high I soar or what I get blessed with or how successful I am. I know that I can trust her because she loved me and cared for me when I was nothing.
That's amazing.
And so she deserves that honor. She deserves that respect. She deserves that care, that praise, that I should lay my life down for her, because without her, I would have no life. There would just be an empty shell. So yeah, she gets a lot of the credit and a lot of the glory.
That's awesome. Give her a kiss. Sweet. Man, I'm so glad you guys came on the show today. I really appreciate you guys coming by and just talking with us. Before we close, I want to offer you guys a gift. I wrote this book, and I think you guys are perfect just to kind of give me some feedback on it. It's called Marriage After Addiction, Take Back Our Life Together.
We would be happy to read this and look at it, and I know we just met, but I would be thankful if you signed it for us and maybe wrote a little something in there.
Well, guys, I'm so grateful that you're here, and I'm going to give you a copy of Marriage After Addiction, Taking Our Life Back Together. And I would love for you just to work through it, one as the supporting spouse, and then one as the person in recovery. And at the end of each chapter, there's questions to answer as your role, and then there's questions you can answer together. And just give me your review, your feedback.
Yeah,
but y'all did great today.
Thank you.
Great today.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming all the way from North Carolina.
Yeah, anytime.
Hey, thanks for tuning in today's episode of Recovery Valve Podcast. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you would like to connect with us, you can connect with us through email at recoveryvalve@gmail.com, our website, recoveryvalve.com, or you can find us on our different social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. But we would love for you to go to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. If you would like to pre-order a copy of my book, Marriage After Addiction, Take Back Your Life Together, you can do that through the store at exomarriage.com, or you'll see a link on any of our social media platforms. I look forward to seeing you again very soon. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Recovery Valve Podcast is brought to you by Goldmec, Newsom Electric, S&S Supplies, Carpet Cleaning Pros of Augusta, Rhett Walker, Atlas Health and Wellness, Norval Fixture and Equipment, Augusta Lawn and Turf, the Augusta Dream Center, Bagwell Insurance, Sally Kohler Photography, Burroughs Elijah Attorneys, Communigraphics, Kendra Neal Studio, Kendrick Paint and Body, Coleman Construction, Augusta Magazine, State Farm Insurance, Craig International, And I want to say thanks to everyone else who's contributed to the Recovery Valve podcast. We couldn't do this without you.